Hello friends, Amy R here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome to my face and my card making space. And a fun video using several different picket fence products. I use some stamps and wafer dies and splatter and tools and all the things. Everything I used will be listed and linked in the description box below the video. And at the end of the video, I'll link to the previous video I've done so far on the Picket Fence Studios channel. And just stay tuned because I will have more videos coming throughout the year. And just stay tuned to this channel because all the other fabulous designers and makers for Picket Fence will be uploading, videos and content and fun things. So if you aren't already subscribed to this channel, I highly recommend it because there is tons of inspiration and wonderful creativity. So that'll all be in the description box linked below. And then keep watching and I will show you guys how I made today's card. So I'm using the Picket Fence Studios Dahlia stamp. It's just one large individual stamp. And I've got some Canson XL watercolor paper and my MISTI. It doesn't really matter with this like what brand of watercolor paper, etc. Because sometimes it really does, the type of paper matters. But with this, just watercolor paper should be fine. So I've got the Canson XL and I used my anti-static powder tool all across this because I don't want the embossing powder to stick to anything other than the stamped image. And then I'm inking up and stamping this image a couple times with clear embossing ink because there's quite a bit of detail in it. And it's going to look like nothing. And when I heat emboss it, it's pretty much going to look like nothing because the magic is when, you add the color. So I flipped the cardstock around and stamped it a second time. And then I'm going to coat this with some detail white embossing powder, tap off the excess, and then I'll melt this with my heat tool, making sure that everything is smooth and shiny and melted. So any of the you can see those grainy areas, blast those with the heat tool to make sure they're melted. And then I always tilt it back and forth in the light because where I'm sitting versus where the camera's filming, it's a lot harder to see. So I just tilt it and then any dull grainy spots, blast them with the heat tool. So once those are melted, I'm just going to use a couple different colors of these Lindy's Magical powders. And I use specifically Blingy Blonde. It's from the Drop Dead Diva set because they come in like sets of 5. And the other one is called High Maintenance Magenta. And then the center color is called Mission Bells Brown, which is from like the Prairie Wildflower set. And the center, when I applied it, I kind of wiped off the excess with a tissue because these will just sort of sit on top of the embossing powder. And then for the petals, I'm using like the yellow and the pink. On my screen as I'm like editing this and doing the voiceover, it looks very green. It's not green. It's very yellow in real life, but I've talked about this before at times in my videos. Yellows are, at least for me, notoriously difficult to film and photograph. They like to do things. But anyway, I started with the yellow and I had used my brush to apply just water, like fairly heavily over all the petals. So it was quite wet. And then I barely would touch my wet brush into the shimmer powders. You do not need much. Literally, I barely touch my brush into them because they are very, very heavily pigmented. Like, trust me, less is more with these. So I applied the yellow first, then I applied the pink, and then I put some of the yellow onto just my work surface. I was picking it up with my brush and just kind of worked that in the middle between the yellow and pink just to blend it a little bit. Not super worried about getting a good blend. You kind of let them do their thing. And that's why I'm very heavy handed with the water so that they can just move. Because that's the magical part of these is they just move. You can see it the minute I touch my brush to those wet parts of the cardstock, they immediately move and they're just fun. So I went and did the exact same thing with the second bloom, painted the center, wiped off the excess because there's not actually much cardstock showing. And then And because you don't want the powders to be sitting on top of the melted embossing powder, only because it'll just wipe off, really. It'll cause a mess. So once these were done and dry, I used the coordinating wafer die to cut these out. You could totally fussy cut an image like this, but I had the coordinating wafer die, so of course I'm going to use it. But yeah, easy to fussy cut because it's a large and a simple sort of outline. And you're going to get an idea of just how big this floral is because I'm going to put it onto an A2 size card front, so 4¼ by 5½. You could most definitely do a larger card size. Usually with things like this, I'll do like a 5x7 card, but wasn't in the mood for that. Decided just to go with A2 sized. So I've got just a panel of white cardstock, A2 size, so 4¼ by 5½. And I pulled out another just like favorite of mine, the Layering Flora Happy Fern die. I don't know. I love this wafer die. So I die cut it from black cardstock, and then I snipped it apart so that I could adhere the two like kind of parts of it separately, kind of as just like a leaf cluster behind each of these florals. And I just ran adhesive just down sort of like the spine of this little like fern image, and adhered that onto the cardstock. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with the die cut florals as well. You could totally pop these up with foam tape. I was thinking about it, but then I'm like, ooh, because I knew what, sentiment wafer die I was going to use. And it was just easier to adhere everything as I did, because if I'd used the foam tape, it would have popped them up, and then I would have had to get a little more finicky with the sentiment to adhere that on top of all that dimension. So this just worked. So I adhered the florals. I'd use my magnets just to hold everything down. You can put like just something heavy on top of it. Let the glue dry, flipped over the card base, trimmed off the excess with my scissors, anything that was hanging off the edges. And then I put this panel into my splat box, and I'm using the Picket Fence Paper Splatter, the liquid white Snowflake. I love this stuff. I love it. It's just like perfect white shimmer. So I shook that up really well, put it on my little palette, and I just splattered this onto that panel with a fan brush. And you can't really see it like in the video, but you can see the splatter like on top of the florals as well. And it's subtle enough that it doesn't interfere with, what's going on. So let that dry. And then the sentiment is another like favorite, not necessarily oldie but goodie. This came out not too long ago. This is another Hello There word die set. And I'm just obsessed with this one. I've used it so many times. So I die cut the hello word from some guava cardstock. And then I just stuck it to one of my paper inking palettes. And I'm using the Picket Fence Pint-sized paper pouncers and just some oxide inks. So I used squeezed lemonade, picked raspberry, and then I'm going in with a little bit of candied apple just along the very bottom of this. Just very lightly, just to intensify all of this just a bit. So I did that bit of blending. I went back in with the pink one and the picked raspberry just to blend them together. So it's just kind of, pulling in those colors that I used on the florals. Removed the die cut pieces, just like, any of my grip mats, anything, these are all photopolymer. I just clean them like you clean your stamps. So I just wipe them off. If I get them really grungy, I wash them with just gentle soap and water in the sink and let them air dry. They're good to go. So, as is tradition, as is one of the rules, dimension is life. I also die cut the hello word a couple more times from the same cardstock, stacking them all together with the craft tacky glue to give them that, thickness and dimension that I just love. And I think that's another reason why I love, I don't often work with individual die cut letters because it's just laziness, honestly. But this one is easy. It's just easy because they're larger, so I don't find it as finicky. And another way to line them up is I just use the negative piece of cardstock to, after I'd stacked the letters, line them all up in that negative piece, and then I just stuck some low tack tape onto this to pick them all up at once. As you could see, flipped it over, removed the negative piece of cardstock. So they're still stuck to the tape, all lined up nice and straight, and then put the adhesive on the back of it, and then just picked it up with that tape and then placed this onto my card panel. So that way I don't have to sit and fiddle and try to line everything up. It's just done. So pressed it down, held the letters, removed that tape, let that dry, and then the remaining part of the sentiment I just die cut from a scrap of black cardstock, and then putting that same craft tacky glue onto this, just little tiny dots, doesn't need much, and then I'm going to adhere that right on top of the die cut letters. So once I've got that adhered into place, I need to do the card base itself. So my card base is going to be an A2 card made from the same just smooth white cardstock. So it'll be a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card. So I put the card base into my MISTI. So I've got the inside of the card here. And then I lined up that Dahlia image again, just along the lower kind of corner of the card base. And then I'm using 2 of the same oxide inks, so the Squeezed Lemonade and the Picked Raspberry, and I also pulled out some Vintage Photo oxide ink. And this is where the pint-sized paper pouncers come in handy. I've shown this in other videos on my channel, using the larger ones to ink up stamps. But the nice thing with the smaller ones is I can get into, you know, smaller areas. So I started with the yellow, because I always start with yellow no matter what I'm doing, or whatever the lightest color is, and obviously in this case it was yellow. So I used the Squeezed Lemonade, applied that with the pouncer, then I applied the Vintage Photo into the center with the pouncer, and then I used the Picked Raspberry all around the edges of the petals with its corresponding pouncer. Stamp that onto the inside of the card. This also could, yes, totally be a clean and simple card front. I just like adding stuff to the insides of my cards. And yeah, this stamp was, once it was stamped, I was like, ooh, I need to do this for like cards with this stamp, because the detail was perfect with the colors of ink and pouncers and all the things. But stamped that on the inside, and then I pulled a sentiment from the Autumn Has Arrived stamp set, lined that up, and I stamped that with some VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink onto the inside of the card. I let those inks dry, and then I adhered the card front to the card base, again with craft tacky glue, because that gives me the wiggle room to get everything lined up, because it is rare. In fact, I can't even remember last time I've ever like applied anything straight. So got that adhered, again, let the glue dry, and then as a final bit of embellishment, I pulled out the Neutral Hearts embellishment mix again, because I just pick out the little clay hearts from the mix, because I just like adding them to my cards. So I picked out some of the black ones and some of the white ones and placed them onto the card front, and then I'm going to adhere these into place again with just little dabs of craft tacky glue. And then once these are adhered, this card is complete. So I will turn my flashlight on so you guys can kind of get an idea of like the sparkle from those magical powders, because yeah, you can't go wrong with shimmery, sparkly goodness. And same with the splatter. It's very, other than on like the actual black die cuts, like on the background, it's a bit more subtle until the light hits it. And then it's like, oh, chef's kiss, perfection. So that finished the card off. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, links to all the supplies I use will be in the description box below the video, so you can just expand that and check that out if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye.